All right. So, welcome everyone, and thank you again so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time to be part of this really important conversation. I know it's not always easy to make time to come to a session like this, and it's not always easy to talk about mental health, but it is really important, and we're really grateful to have you all here and grateful to have this opportunity. And I want to say thank you to Simi Valley for hosting us tonight, for allowing us to be part of this conversation with you all in your community. My name is Michael, and my colleague Juan and I are joining from an organization called Daybreak Health. And tonight we are going to be talking about understanding and supporting anxiety in kids, specifically our younger kids, what anxiety looks like, and how we can help them deal with some of these big feelings. Before we move on, Jamie or Jake or anybody from the Simi team, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate the attendance. We have quite a few attendees, so this is great. I have the pleasure of introducing two of our counselors. There are elementary counselors that support our TK through sixth grade students on the elementary campuses. So Heidi Vega and Laura Doyen, they're going to be here to answer questions and provide support, and also in conjunction with our Daybreak team. So thank you again for those of you who are taking your time out tonight. I see a lot of information that's coming in through the chat, things that you're hoping to learn tonight. So hopefully we can definitely address all of them. And if not, then it gives us something to work on for the next time.
Yeah.
So
Um,
Heidi, Laura, I don't know if you want to give a little information about yourselves. I know I said that you work with our TK through sixth grade students, but you're not on all elementary campuses. So maybe share with our families where you're at and a little bit of your background.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Doyen. I'm one of the elementary counselors, and I work at Hollow Hills, Catherine, and Arroyo. So each school has an elementary counselor that is on campus either 1 or 2 days a week.
I'm Heidi Vega. I'm also an elementary school counselor. I'm at the title school, so I'm at Arroyo, Barrelwood, Santa Sue, and Parkview. And obviously, if you have a child that's not at a school that's one of ours, just know that they have a great counselor. We're always here to help and support, and really see what kind of supports your child might need. So we're always open to conversations and see how we could connect your child to the most appropriate service.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us, for allowing us to be part of this conversation with you all, and for all of the work that you all are doing at Simi, supporting the kids and the kids in the community. We're really grateful to be part of this with you all. So, a little bit of background. Like I said, Juan and I are joining from an organization called Daybreak Health, where we are on a mission to create a world where every young person has access to the mental health support that they need. We do that through a couple of different ways, online counseling, as well as these classes to make sure that you all, as family members, caregivers, loved ones of our little ones, that you have the information, the tools, the resources that you need to help take care of your own mental health and the mental health of the kids in your lives. And I'm going to pass it over to Juan to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here today. My name is Juan Trevino. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been working in the field for almost 20 years now, specializing in school-age children. I'm the National Clinical Director at Daybreak Health, and I'm just so excited to see the attendance, all the comments, lots of common themes, and I'm just looking forward to talking about anxiety, how it manifests in children, and some great strategies for you all. I really encourage you, if at the end you feel like you'd like to hear a little bit more about a specific strategy or something your child is dealing with, to use the Q&A, and I'll try to get to all of them. And again, just elated to be here today.
Thanks, Juan. And again, my name is Michael. I'm the manager of our virtual classes program with Daybreak, which means that I help to organize, develop, and facilitate all of our sessions. My background is in psychology and visual arts, specifically running mental health workshops. And I also currently work as a crisis counselor for a youth suicide prevention hotline. And, similar to Juan, I really care about making sure kids have the tools and the skills that they need to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. And tonight, we're going to talk about that in the sense of anxiety. And we'll start off by talking about the prevalence and the impact of anxiety. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between feelings of anxiety or feelings of stress and what is more leaning towards an anxiety disorder. We will talk about some signs and symptoms of anxiety, especially in little ones. And then we will talk about some actionable ways to support kids, some coping skills and strategies that hopefully you can use to help make things a little bit easier for kids who may be struggling. And then, like I mentioned, we will have our Q&A at the end.
Okay, here we go. Again, just so glad that there's so many people attending today, and I want to talk about really this emotional piece. And we think about emotions or typical reactions to situations. Now, specifically for elementary age kids, there is a wide range of emotions, and a lot of these are associated. I'll begin with the positive, right? This idea of a normal reaction, excitement and enthusiasm. And we love to see this in children, this genuine excitement when doing activities that we enjoy, right? And so children just have this unique ability to show us what they're feeling, their experience, right? This joy and happiness is so frequent as we form friendships and as we succeed in an academic task. Like I did that. We can see just this incredible joy when we children participate in activities. And one of my favorites is just the general curiosity and wonder that elementary age children can exhibit, right? This curiosity about the world and the world around them. But there's also this normal reaction, I'll use that word carefully, of when things aren't so good. And elementary age kids and children in general are good at communicating their needs through behaviors, right? And we think about frustration or disappointment and what that can manifest like, whether it's a challenge in an academic situation or frustration, right? And that's all part of learning how to cope with setbacks. Or for many of you are here for this idea of fear and anxiety of, this idea of like being afraid of the dark. Very normal experience, right? Children are afraid of new experiences. It's quite common. But typically those things diminish over time or get better with a level of reassurance, like it's okay, we'll use a nightlight, right? These things typically do get better. And we think about this negative side where elementary age kids can want to avoid situations, right? That behavior of avoidance is telling us, hey, this could be a larger issue. Anger and frustration, a very normal range of emotions for elementary age kids, especially when there's conflicts or something they don't like, right? So those behaviors tell us a lot. And then obviously, I think of sadness and for elementary age kids where it's a response to these challenges, right? So we have this typical side of, yeah, children can demonstrate all these things positively and negatively, but at what point is it like, oh, I'm actually very concerned for my child? And so while we know it's normal to experience this range of emotions, the important things I want parents and educators to really be focused on is this intensity and duration. How big are we experiencing these emotions and for how long? And we really get concerned or tend to think, okay, this may be a larger issue when our overall functioning is impacted, whereby kids can't reach their full potential or don't want to go to school or want to avoid these things, right? So when it's excessive and persistent over longer periods of time, it tells us, hey, you know what? This might go beyond the norm of how I'm responding to these things. This may be something that, without calling it a disorder, that says, hey, you know what? We do need some skills around addressing these issues, these struggles with our children. We do need to teach skills, and I'm excited to be talking about those today with you all on how can we overcome when it is more frequent and more intense to when my child's functioning is interfered with or impacted. Now, when we think about anxiety and when it becomes too much, it's important that we focus on the different types of anxiety, right? Really normal, for children, for instance, to experience separation anxiety, this apprehension about going to school or being away from home, right? So that's a very common one for children. It's labeled in the green here. This reluctance to being away, right? For fear of something bad could happen, or worry about being away from that person. We have other types of anxiety that fall into this category of generalized, or it's just kind of present with a variety of situation, even though there's no apparent threat. Nothing is actually there. We're not really sure why we're feeling anxious. And again, children will exhibit this oftentimes through behavior, through avoidance, through somatic complaints, not feeling well. Another type of anxiety children often have or suffer from is this idea of social anxiety, or this extreme fear of competitive situations, or being judged, right? This fear of rejection or humiliation. Okay. This is another area I saw in the comments someone concerned about sports, or with doing well in school or social situations. So that kind of falls under this idea of social anxiety that can be prevalent in those kinds of situations. The reason it's important that we put these things into different buckets is because it gives us an idea of how to treat and deal with these things. And as we think about these things, if it falls in these certain buckets, it can really determine what we're going to do next. Now, the last thing we think of is the idea of panic. This is when one of these an area of anxiety kind of falls into this extreme terror, right? This can be crying. This can be just kind of what we might describe as tantruming or losing control. This intense fear whereby our children are living in this area called the amygdala of the brain, right? It's very emotionally driven. There's no rationale there, right? It's complete panic. And what's important there is that we're able to work and calm from that. So we would have generalized anxiety, social anxiety, or separation, with or without this idea of panic. So we can kind of scale how large is this, how big is this beginning to happen. So those are kind of the different buckets anxiety can fall in. And then again, where I started is kind of describing the severity. Does it fall under like it's here, or is it intense and now is impacting functioning? And that's important because it tells us, okay, what level of intervention might I need? What kind of resources should I be discussing or talking about? I'm going to pass it over to Michael to describe this a bit more, these different signs of anxiety. And I mentioned a couple, but please, Michael.
Yeah, so like Juan mentioned, there's a couple of different ways that anxiety can manifest in terms of what children are responding to. And again, like Juan mentioned, anxiety is a part of life. You know, we all will experience some feelings of anxiety, stress, worry from time to time, and especially in kids as they're going through some of their big firsts. You know, they're going to school for the first time, they're dealing with new situations that can come with some anxiety. But when it becomes persistent, when it's impacting their functioning, that's when we maybe want to seek some extra support. And some signs that we might be on the lookout for: the first is any big changes. You know your children best, you know what their baseline is. And when you start to notice these big changes in their behavior or in their mood, that's when maybe, there some flags go up that something might be off, and maybe it could be related to their mental health or anxiety. Um, and anxiety in particular is a very physical experience. Our mental health and our physical health are really closely related, and oftentimes we'll feel symptoms of our emotions or our mental health in our bodies. And it can be hard for kids, especially little ones, to understand that, to know that what they're feeling physically might be a symptom of how they're feeling emotionally. So maybe they're complaining about things like frequent stomach aches or headaches, physical discomfort, or their muscle tension, restlessness, fidgeting. Maybe they're having difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. These these frequent complaints of not feeling good in their bodies could be a symptom of not feeling good emotionally. Any sort of emotional changes as well, feelings of irritability or feeling easily frustrated, maybe having intense mood swings or these persistent feelings that they can't shake or they can't be reassured out of. They're not able to be comforted or calmed down. Behavioral changes, like Juan mentioned, maybe they're avoiding, maybe they are constantly seeking reassurance from you. That might be a sign that their worry is a little bit excessive. Changes in their social behavior, maybe they are withdrawing, they're isolating, they are not interested in spending time with friends or spending time with family in ways they maybe were before. And cognitive aspects, maybe they're engaged in a lot of repetitive or overthinking patterns. You can see that they aren't able to let things go. They're really stuck in these patterns or they're overthinking things. Then maybe they're really focused on potential negative outcomes whenever they're thinking about the future or what might go wrong. They're worried about their performance. They're having difficulty concentrating. These all might be signs that kids might be struggling. And some of these we often maybe attribute, maybe we're frustrated or to just their bad behavior or they're being disrespectful. And, you know, I want to encourage a lot of empathy. It's hard, when kids are having constant tantrums, um, or they're having trouble concentrating, or you can't reassure them out of these things. But trying to come from a perspective of maybe there's something going on here. How can I help my child through this experience? Um, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in our as we move into strategies. But first, I wanted to take a look at where kids are developmentally, because I think this helps bring a little bit of that empathy in trying to remember that kids don't have all of the same tools, all of the same strategies that we do. Um, you know, Kids ages 2 to 7 are in what we call the pre-operational stage, which means that they tend to focus on one aspect of a situation and ignore other pieces of it. They can't really juggle or balance a lot of nuance or a lot of different aspects. They have one track minds and they can get really focused, which can be challenging if they're experiencing anxiety because maybe they can't incorporate any other information. They only can focus on that thing that's making them feel bad. Um, and this is, a direct result of having limited processing abilities just based on where their brains are in development. When we get a little bit older, 7 to 11-ish, they're in what we call the concrete operational stage. They are developing a little bit more ability to logically reason and problem solve on their own. They can take in a little bit more information. But when we're thinking about anxiety and behavioral problems, kids are just starting to develop the ability to rationalize and cope with these really big feelings that they're having. And so it's important for us to remember what they are able to do and try to meet them where they're at with some strategies, with a lot of love, with a lot of support, and try to help them build up some coping skills and ways to deal with those big feelings in the ways that they are able to. And so we're going to jump into talking about some support strategies, ways that we can help kids cope with these big feelings.
Okay, I'm smiling because this is my favorite part. Really getting into this idea of, and this is where I really want to engage parents, and I really heard the idea of why we're here. It's simply to understand where your children are and what to do. I'm a parent myself, and I can tell you sometimes when my children go through these experiences, it's very uncomfortable for me, and I want to deny their experience. You shouldn't be feeling like that. You're fine. School's not that bad. What's your problem? I did this. and I totally dismiss where my children are at. And mind you, I work in mental health. This is my job. It's incredibly hard as parents not to become emotional or elicit this frustration in us rather than understanding where our children are. So that's really my goal here, to talk about this so that you all can have these conversations. So again, they're experiencing this anxiety, this panic. They feel overwhelmed, out of control, right? So hard as parents. So the first thing I want to recognize is, how would we respond in a perfect way? As a parent of your children, how would you respond in that perfect way? And so that's really this overarching goal. I want to give you the idea of grounding in the present moment, or helping these children get out of that moment, because anxiety, it's thought-based, right? It's a fear of what will happen. It's very thought-based, and sometimes it's even assuming the worst. The expectation of what will happen can be really overwhelming. And we want to increase their idea of sense of control. So Michael mentioned this concrete operational stage, 7 to 11. Children can begin to engage their brain and problem solve, but not when they're really anxious. In those moments, the goal is to calm them down. I'll talk about that. But where I want to get is this idea of exposure. Exposure therapy, the idea is that we want to expose our children to the thing that makes them fearful. So by avoiding it, we can actually make anxiety worse at times. Okay, so this idea of gradually exposing a child to that separation for a short period of time and then increasing it over time, right? This gradual exposure. And I think one of the biggest things we can do with gradual exposure is establish a routine, a predictable routine of what will happen. Someone in the chat mentioned, my child doesn't want to go to school, right? This is fear about what school is. Okay, let's talk about that routine. First, we do this, then we do this, then we come home. It's all about establishing that safety of, this is exactly what we can expect to happen, and then reinforce them for positive experiences. One of the things I really encourage parents to talk about with their children is the idea of bravery or courage. Talk about that word. This is the goal. Yeah, I know it's going to be hard. I recognize where you are, but I want you to practice courage. And this is what we can expect throughout that routine. So routines are incredibly important. Same routines for bedtime, what we do when we wake up in the morning, as we prepare, right? It's very important that we praise and reward positive experiences through those routines. The idea, again, of exposure and routine building with something that's more generalized anxiety. We want to be teaching the routine of, recognize where you are and develop some coping skills. And we'll talk about some of those coping skills on the next slide. But here's what you can do as a way to manage yourself. You feel yourself getting anxious? Let's use some of those coping skills as part of routine, right? And the idea that exposure to this, that's something difficult, can make us more brave. So we want to empower parents, empower children. But also, as we deal with this, we want to set some realistic goals, right? Hey, we made it to school. There should be a goal of, yeah, you can do this. And here's what happens when you do, and really positively reinforce those things, fostering this sense of accomplishment when we overcome our fear. Now, most parents I work with, when you ask, would you like your child to feel empowered, to feel brave, to feel like they can overcome challenges? And the answer is always yes. And so we want to set those things up. I heard another in the comment about my child, in social interactions, whether they're being called on by a teacher, etc. So again, we can gradually expose that child to situations like that, where you're asking questions, or another trusted adult asking them questions. And we can support them in building that strength, whether it's you, maybe it's an aunt, maybe it's a grandma, maybe it's ordering at a restaurant, right? Hey, I want you to order the soda for yourself. Hey, you did it. You can do that, and building that exposure to a social situation and then positively reinforcing it and celebrating that social success, right? Because we can do those things through exposure, through routines, positively reinforce. And, oh, you were a little nervous ordering. Okay, what can we do? What kind of coping skill? Here's what I do when I'm nervous. I'm going to model that. I was actually nervous to talk in front of all of you today. There's a lot of participants here today. Here's something that I did, and sharing those experiences that are actually relevant to your family and to your child. It's really, really important, right? Other phobias, again, gradually exposing your child to this kind of fear in a supported manner. right? If we can identify someone at school that can help, huge. Um, whether it's panic attacks, perfectionism, we're going to skill build, we're going to do exposure. Now, as we get to these ideas for calm, this is something that I think is going to be a little bit different for every child. But this is really grounding, trying to bring awareness. And what grounding mindfulness for me is just a fancy way of saying in the moment. But what it really is using the senses, using my thinking brain instead of living in the amygdala, that fight or flight brain. It brings us to present moment. And I'm going to give you a really specific example of how you might have seen this work for your children before. When they're little and they fall down and they skin their knee, or you're kind of like, oh, they might be hurt. And maybe they're hurt a little bit and they're crying, and you say, hey, look at that over there. It's an airplane. And they're like, huh? What? So they're sobbing and they go to like, wait, what? What is this? And they're able to shift their attention very quickly. This can work on bringing them to the present moment. So practicing mindfulness is simply a way of distracting or moving their attention from the amygdala of the brain to the senses or to the prefrontal cortex, to that other part of the brain. Now, that can help us pay attention to what's around us instead of living in that fearful moment. So if you can use your brain for like a logical task, it can distract you or help you emotionally regulate, right? So it's really important. This can be with things like a deep breathing exercise. Yeah, I know it sounds like, and listen, this doesn't work with every child. I can tell you, I've worked with a lot of young boys and they are just not going to take breaths. It's just not going to, right? You tell them like, take 5 deep breaths. And like, they seriously want to tell you like, you can shut up with that, right? But there are other ways of being mindful, whether it's a physical activity, shooting hoops, paying attention. A lot of people describe physical activity as that I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just doing this activity. Same thing. We're getting away from that amygdala. So we can think of mindfulness in different ways. I love distraction. I absolutely love distraction. I think Michael's going to talk about one of my favorite distracting activities with the in a couple slides, so I won't steal it, but I love distraction for children for sure. Fidget toys. This was a really popular thing, focusing on one thing again, getting away from the amygdala and into our prefrontal cortex. And oftentimes with anxiety, that's the goal, just shifting. And then guess what I would do? Praise it. Hey, I noticed you were really anxious here a second ago. Did your breathing? You snapped out of it, and it only took you 3 minutes that time. Great. Let's reinforce it. We might even practice. Let's do a little bit more, right? I see in the chat, yeah, math can take away from the amygdala, but math can be frustrating, especially if you're me. But yeah, if you know your child and that's something that's going to work for them, great. You see a lot of children tracing, doing mandala, the little coloring books. That's what that really is. Like a coloring book helped me calm down. No, it was shifting my senses to that. So reading, fidget toys, dancing to music, all of those things take us away to that other place of mindfulness. One of my favorites on the way to school to an unpreferred activity is positive affirmations. Love this. They're mantras. I am strong. I am capable. I am brave. Again, I am strong. I am capable. I am brave. That sounds a little different for every kiddo, but it's equipping them with, yeah, I'm going to feel this way, but I can overcome this too. And it's huge. It is huge. I know it sounds, give it a whirl, right? And find something that works for your child. The last one is connection. This is something that is absolutely helpful in helping us deal with all kind of range of emotions, right? But a great mindfulness activity that I suggest, go connect with someone, spend time with a friend. Who's a supportive person? By the way, I love that Simi introduced their counselors. Yeah, your counselor's someone you should meet. Yeah, let's build that routine. Let's meet that counselor because this is someone that's going to help you be brave when you're at school, right? Someone that can help us have predictability and routine in our days. The elementary day is so, the foundation is around routine. Most teachers have their schedule right up there on the board, right? And we can build in routines for also connecting with others, mindfulness, who's people we can problem solve, right? And those are really, really important that we tap into those different routines there at school. I also love reading books about emotions. And I'm going to make one suggestion. My favorite book, Green Eggs and Ham. I'm going to make the suggestion with Green Eggs and Ham because when you think about Green Eggs and Ham, it's all about someone who's really rigid in their thinking and nothing will work. No matter what Sam does, he does not like green eggs and ham. No matter what I do, replace it. I can't go to school. Even with a fox in a box in a house with a mouse, all the things that, that the author talks about, what it really is, after he tries it, he can do it and he does like it. And so I love that book because it makes a connection to, I thought I couldn't and I did, and I could. And for elementary age kids, that's what it's about. The little engine that could, right? My child likes this book called The Angry Bear Snores On. It's all about problem solving, isn't it? Oh yeah, the bear found out this is what he really needs. And so using that kind of art or literature can be really helpful in helping our children not only calm but overcome. I'm probably over time, so I'm going to pass it to Michael for a few other ideas for calm.
I think that was great. And I really want to emphasize with what Juan said, that what it's about is figuring out what works for your child, because not every technique is going to work for every child. But by helping them figure out that they can overcome these feelings, helping them to identify when they're having a big feeling, and then afterwards, talking about it and talking with them when they're feeling good about how can we try to feel better when we feel these big feelings, so that when they are in those moments of anxiety or when they're in those moments of panic, you've already practiced your coping skills. You've worked on them. You've talked about them. Maybe you have a list of them somewhere, or you have a toolbox of them where you talk about, when I'm feeling this way, I go to my anxiety toolbox and I have a list of things I can try. Like Juan mentioned, breathing techniques, mindfulness, they're really helpful. There's a link here to different breathing techniques that will come out when we send out the deck. But one that is really helpful, especially for kids, is 5-finger breathing. So you hold up your hand and you trace slowly around your hand, and you breathe in as you go up and breathe out as you go down. Breathe in as you go up, out as you go down, and you go all around your finger, and you can go back. And what it does is it engages your physical senses. You're using your touch, you're using your sight to watch your hands, you're grounding yourself in the moment, and they're practicing those deep breaths. I know it sounds cheesy, but it works. When you get oxygen into your lungs, you get oxygen into your brain, it can calm down your nervous system and help you to calm down those big feelings. Box breathing is also one that works really well. You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. Maybe you do this with them, or maybe um, you know, if they're struggling, if they like hugs, you hug them and you breathe together. You use your breath to help regulate theirs. That connection can be really helpful. But these breathing exercises and teaching them, maybe it's they're pretending to blow up a balloon, to take the deepest breath you can and then blow up the balloon as big as you can, or blowing on a dandelion. Anything to try to help them understand and get in the practice of those deep breaths, so that when they're in those moments of anxiety, they've already practiced those things and they can use those skills to help regulate themselves. Some other strategies, like we mentioned, anxiety is really physical. We feel it in our bodies, especially with kids. So some other physical ways that they can try to calm down their bodies to help calm down their brains. One is progressive muscle relaxation, which is just a fancy way of saying noticing all the different parts of your body and where you're maybe holding your anxiety. So you can ask them, you know, ask them, where's your jaw? Can you relax it? How about your tongue? Can you relax it? What about your shoulders? Can you take a deep breath and let your shoulders drop down? and helping them to try to release that anxiety in their body. Maybe clenching your fists really, really, really tight, clenching all your muscles really tight, and then releasing them can provide a little bit of a sense of relief in your body. Something as simple as rubbing your palms together, going for a walk, stomping your feet, maybe taking a shower, splashing cold water on your face, a smell that they maybe like. Chair push-ups can be helpful in school. So, when they're sitting in their chairs, they put their palms on the side of their chair and they lift their body up. It engages their muscles, and then they release back down. These ways that we can try to release the tension from their bodies. And one that I love is called the 3-3-3 rule. It is hopefully easy to remember, just in those threes. So you look around and name 3 things that you can see, name 3 things that you can hear, and move 3 parts of your body. And again, it's just about engaging that thinking part of their brain to get them out of that emotional part and grounding them in the present so that they're not thinking about that future worry. You can get them out of that spiral to a place where they can maybe think more logically about how they're feeling. And you can do this as many times as you want. We do the 3-3-3 rule in one room and then say, okay, now we're going to go outside and do the 3-3-3 rule out here. What are 3 things you see outside? What are 3 things you hear outside? What are 3 parts of your body you can move now that you have more space? And just try to really engage them in that grounding exercise. And then one more strategy that I love, I'm an art guy, so I think that creativity, especially for kids, can be really helpful. They don't always have the words to describe how they're feeling, but they can often express themselves creatively. And when I was working in a youth mental health hospital, one that kids loved doing is making these happy boxes and these worry boxes. So you take any sort of box, an old shoe box or any kind of box, and use whatever you've got. If you've got paint, you've got markers, you've got an old puzzle that's missing some pieces, you've got some broken toys, hot glue gun, whatever they want to use to decorate their happy box or their worry box in a way that feels right for them. And then they can use it however they want. A couple of ideas. If they're feeling worried, write down what they're worried about. Sometimes just getting it out of our head and onto paper can help it feel not so big and scary. And then they put it in the worry box and maybe they come back to it later. Or maybe you write down lots of things that you're grateful for, things that make you happy. You put them in your happy box so that afterwards you have a place you can go to read the things that make you feel happy when you're not feeling so great. Or maybe they know that every night you're going to check the worry box, and it's a way they can communicate with you if they're feeling anxious about saying these things out loud. And maybe you write them notes back in their worry box so that they have a safe way to hear back from you if they're feeling anxious about saying it out loud. Trying to meet them where they're at, and just provide different avenues for them to share with you, connect with you, can be really helpful. And creativity can be a really helpful way for kids to express themselves when they don't maybe always have the words or the confidence to say them out loud.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And I just, want to encourage everyone, when you hear some of these ideas and you might practice them with your children, I want to make one suggestion around like, okay, if we can identify where we are scale, 1 to 5, how are you feeling? Okay, then we practice this skill. 1 to 5, how are you feeling? It can just be a way for your child to kind of connect the dots that, oh yeah, that did help me feel a bit better. And it can begin to empower them with like, look, you have some control over this. And you're showing, again, I mentioned bravery, courage, resilience, right? And so it's really, really important that, we practice these things and then we can measure the efficacy of them. Now, seeking help, totally understand, it can be difficult to ask for support, but know this, as a clinician, my job is really teaching parents, helping children identify coping skills and strategies so that I'm not really needed anymore. Right. So it's something we can teach skills around. You practice those things, children practice these things, and then, they're able to overcome challenges or difficulties or anxiety on their own. So that's ultimately the goal. But when you notice that look, this has been going on for too long, or there's this duration, or it's gone on a long time, and we're not able to function in certain settings. Going to school is more and more difficult. We can't do this anymore. We're avoiding social situations. So functioning is impacted. It's a good time to talk to someone about, hey, where can I seek help? I always recommend, as a school-based social worker, yeah, talk to your school counselor, talk to a teacher, talk to another trusted parent or family member, or even a clergy member about getting support and resources for your child. Again, knowing that it's not forever. So please, if there's big impairment, we know that the earlier we intervene, the sooner we teach these skills, the more likely we are to see positive outcomes. When children learn how to have emotions work through them, right, rather than just kind of resonating with them, right? We suppress those feelings. Well, that's when they can become bigger. So we want to treat things when they're small. And if it comes to a place where functioning is impaired, please seek support from, again, I mentioned quite a few, even checking in with your pediatrician, an individual therapist. I'll say this too, though. If you meet with a therapist or someone and you don't feel like they're a great fit, ask for a new one. I've been doing this a long time. I'm not the best fit for every child and family. Hard to imagine. And it's my job to identify that and say, look, there's someone better for you out there. Let me help find them. Because the idea of, I met with therapists, it didn't work. It's really hard to hear, because it is my job to help clients meet their goals. It doesn't necessarily mean it's with me, and that's okay. So do seek out support. Again, I mentioned earlier, the diagnosis and treatment, the better. And so again, I would encourage you. I know the counselors here at Simi were here offering their level of support that they offer. And then if I could, I did want to speak to one of the questions in the chat. Michael, is it okay if I speak to one of the questions? Someone asked, and this is a big one I get, around bedtime. My child wants to sleep in my bed. So I wanted to, again, focus on that question and just highlight this idea of building routine and structure. One, create a calming bedtime routine that's consistent night over night, right? It could include reading a book, having but some kids bathe before they go to bed, right? Something relaxing, or even listening to soothing music, right? Not the best time to have a TV or app on. We know it kind of stimulates, makes us more anxious with all the inputs. Next, this idea of gradual transition from bed or out. So you can start by spending some of the night in their room, right? We can work on that routine. We can work on those things, and then reducing that until they're more comfortable sleeping alone. So start this in stages. It's not an all or nothing. I love comfort objects. Like, nope, you can't sleep in my bed, but here's my pillow. Here's a sweater you can sleep with. You can put it on your pillow, and it's like I'm there, right? Having comfort objects can be a helpful transition. Night lights, positive reinforcement, like, hey, spend one night in your bed this week, and that's the goal. And then 2 nights, then 3 nights, right? We want to kind of build on that. I love empowering kids with creating their own really comfortable sleep environment. And actually, I dealt with this one with a student who was much older than elementary school. But well, I was really, we started with the same sheets that were in a parent's room. So it can be something like that, and really working with your child and creating that sleep environment. Consistency, and then, as Michael was talking about, addressing anxiety during the day, not only when it's happening, right? That's when it's hardest. Address these things throughout the day, and that can be really helpful. And then be patient. Be really patient. I know how frustrating it can be as an adult to share that space, and your child's getting older. So be patient with yourselves. Practice these things. If they're not working, go back to others. Keep refining that until you're getting the kind of success. And I love charts, behavior charts, again, based on things that you can actually do or that your child might be willing to earn. And yeah, believe it or not, I have LED lights in my child's room everywhere, and not my choice, but it's working to keep them there. So I'm wanting to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, just one thing I want to highlight on that is, or two things. One, letting them know what to expect in those routines. This is what we're working on, so that they know what to expect. They know when you're going to be shifting down from how much time you spend can help reduce some of that anxiety, and that a professional can help you set up these kinds of structures and these routines. Exposure can be really, really hard with anxiety. It can be hard for the child, can be hard for you, and a professional can help you set up these routines to help that work more smoothly, more controlled, and get some support. And with that, I want to move into the resources. There's a lot of really incredible resources available through your district and through your schools. We are really grateful to be a part of that constellation of services, but there's a lot of really wonderful people who are working really hard to make sure that your kids have all of the support that they need. So Jamie, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the resources that are available?
Sorry, I've been toggling back and forth between different screens, so I was trying to find my unmute. Thank you both, Juan and Michael. Incredibly important information that you've shared this evening. And yes, there's many, many resources. And this evening we have 2 of our elementary counselors on the call. And at our secondary level, we do have counselors assigned to each of the school sites. But on our district's webpage, we do have our Simi Valley Schools resources, so that you can link to additional services. We are always here to provide support in a variety of ways. So there's district-based resources, but oftentimes we might need to refer you out to other agencies, some of our community partners. As an educational institution, we can do quite a bit to help and support and offer guidance, but sometimes we do need to reach outside of what we're able to provide here at the district and the site level. So I will turn it over to Heidi and Laura. They are the experts in this field. I am not the expert. I just, like to really tag along and hear all of their wonderful advice that they share, along with Juan and Michael, with everything that you've provided. It's all very timely, and I know that our parents, just by the chat and some of the questions that we've had, they've really appreciated what you've been able to share today.
I'll talk, and if I freeze, I'm sorry, my internet's unstable, but I think it's great, like Michael and Juan mentioned, every child is so different. So it's great if you're noticing something at school, at home, let the teacher know, let us know. We can meet with the student. What's worked with some students that are having a hard time coming into the school is slowing their morning down a little bit. Having a calming tools in the office. It might be a pinwheel, a breathing board that they identify that they like. Coming in and us setting the timer and letting them know you're going to have 5 minutes in here, and then we're going to walk you to class. And then as we're walking, we're not talking about class, we're talking about soccer, we're talking about messy, we're talking about other things, that distraction too, and helping them and knowing that they like to come in from the back, the classroom. We've had teachers also have 2 seats, 1 seat in the back, and then 1 seat where they usually sit. And then they can kind of choose where they go to, different things like that. We like to read books to students too, if they're in counseling. One of my favorite ones is Worry, Say What, where it's a monster, and the worry, as they listen to that monster, it gets bigger and bigger, and it stops them from doing their favorite things, like playing, like doing gymnastics. And it really starts a conversation of, what does your monster say? When do they come out? And what have you noticed that it stopped you from doing? So that's a good one. We have Wemberly Worried, another one, Wilma Jean, the Worry Machine. That one's really good too. And oh my God, you feel overwhelmed for this girl because she's just, and I worry about this and that, but it's really great because it starts that conversation and it starts that conversation of what's the feeling, right? Because if you talk about it being a feeling, they're going to know it's going to go away. But it's also important to tackle those thoughts. We call it the magic triangle, or like cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's about letting them know the connection between my thoughts affect how I feel, and the way I feel affects how I'm going to behave in this situation. So as you can be the model and say, I have a presentation, or I have a meeting with my boss, my thought is, oh my goodness, I'm going to do horrible and I'm going to feel anxious, and then I might trip over my words. So maybe I'm going to switch my thought to, I've done this before and I'm prepared and I might feel more confident and I might get my words across. It's really important that we're the models, but that we're, naming these feelings, that we're doing these strategies. We call it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things that you see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell. And sometimes I might go, oh, I smell myself. It's after recess or after lunch. But those things are really helpful too. So those are some things that we do for the students.
Thanks, Heidi. And this was all great information. And I'll just add that if you do have any concerns or if you just want to talk to your school counselor, you can always reach out. Every elementary school has a school counselor that you can reach out to. You can send us an email, you can call, you can always call the office and ask if they can send us an email, but we're here to support you. So feel free to reach out to us. We can always do check-ins with students if you just want your student to get to know who we are and know that there's a counselor on campus that they can talk to if they feel like they need to. So feel free to reach out to us if you need anything.
Awesome. Thank you both. And I know we're getting to just about time, but there's a couple of questions, so I want to make sure that we answer a few of them. First, one question that came in, Heidi, is about those books that you mentioned. Would you mind to type those out in the chat so that folks can copy those down? And My Many Colored Days, somebody mentioned, I love that one too. There's a lot of really great books and they can be really helpful for kids. Another one that I see is working on self-deprecating and negative self-talk. I'm ugly, I'm useless, and not responding to praise or those positive feedback, and how we can work with that. Juan or
Yeah,
Heidi?
I'd love to speak to that one, but I also know that I have Heidi and Laura here as well, who are more than capable. So if you want to chime in, please do. But around your high achieving 5-year-old who is self-deprecating, and I would just add, I'm seeing a lot more anxiety, higher rates of anxiety in high achievers. It's actually a very common theme, and statistically speaking, it is more common for high achievers to feel more anxious around perfectionism. What I would really try to do is outline the critical inner voice. What does that critic sound like? Not good enough. And then really empower your child to talk back to that voice with an inner coach, right? This idea of self-deprecation, critic versus coach. And things we want to gravitate towards fall around Carol Dweck's book on growth mindset. This idea that your child's abilities are not fixed. They're not just good at math or good at gymnastics. How did we get there? And the idea that if we can practice these things, we can be more supportive of ourselves, and the idea that we can learn and get better, that failures and mistakes are opportunities for growth. We can begin to say, yeah, I didn't get this right, but I learned something, and we can grow from that experience versus being very self-deprecating. So I would really practice that coach voice, identify things the inner critic says, and what would an inner coach say instead, and then focus on the idea that mistakes are opportunities, or this idea of growth mindset for your child. And note that most people's like, you feel like, oh, I'm really good at this. You're not born that way. We really practice those things. Yes, you have a capacity for things, sure, but we really grow into those things, and it's very rarely are we just great at something right out of the gate. We got good by practicing, and we can continue to get better, and that mistakes are opportunities for growth.
Yeah, and I want to call back to those mantras too that you talked about before, Juan. We have something, I forget the statistic, but way more negative thoughts every day than we do positive thoughts. And just practicing saying those positive mantras. What do they love about themselves? What do they feel confident in? Write those things down, post them on sticky notes on the mirror, say them together every morning. The practice, the repetition, even if they don't believe it while they're saying it, that practice and that repetition can help change that mindset. And if anybody else has anything you want to chime in on that. Or another question that came in about sitting out at recess because she doesn't know how to join in. and sort of struggling with approaching um, approaching students and other classmates to make friends. Does anybody have anything that you want to share maybe on that?
Didn't
I'll
see
just
that
say,
one. Go ahead, Laura, please.
oh, to that, I always do tell students when they talk about that, they don't know who they can go play with. I encourage them to also talk to the yard duties. They can go, there's yard duties that are out there, and they can go and ask for help and say, can you help me find someone who would be a nice fit for me to play with? And then they can help facilitate that as well. If their teacher knows what's going on, then their teacher might be able to kind of pair them up with someone before they go out to recess, so they have a plan on who they can play with. I know that the teachers can give some great ideas of people that they can join in with, and encouraging them to use their words to ask someone to play and to join in with them.
Yeah, there was another question in the chat about can teachers play a role in anxiety? I think anyone in a role of authority can play a role in that. And so what I would really recommend is just talking with that teacher, partnering with the counseling staff to make teachers aware of the impact that they may or may not be having. In my experience, 99.9% of teachers have phenomenal intentions. And when we make them aware and partner with them, they will work with us to help our child have a positive experience in their classroom. Again, that's in my experience, if you make them aware, like, oh my gosh, I did not know that was the result of perhaps feedback for a child. So absolutely partner, and 99.9% of the time teachers have phenomenal intentions, but also have a big class to deal with. So I would absolutely partner with your counselors to work on those. If there's better ways that they can communicate. I know my child, it's non-verbally versus calling them out in front of the whole class. It's one of those, like, to help get back on task instead of you're off task, stop what you're doing, right? So I would absolutely partner with your teacher and your staff there at school.
Yeah. I know we're a few minutes over, so I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for being here today, for taking the time to share your questions and things that you're dealing with. I think it is so powerful to know that we're not alone, and that if your child is struggling, if your family is dealing with anxiety, your child is not alone, you are not alone. And when we come together and we have these kinds of conversations, we share our ideas and we share our compassion with each other, I think this is where we can really start to make life a little bit easier for the kids in our lives that we love. And so I just want to say thank you for being here. And I hope you give yourselves a pat on the back for taking the time to join and learn something new and be part of this community. So thank you everyone for joining us. We are going to have more classes coming up, and I'll send a link to register for those when in the email afterwards, where I'll also send out a copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording. So thank you for joining. I put a link to a feedback form in the chat. Your feedback is hugely helpful. If there's things you liked, we love to hear that. If there's things you think we can do better, it's awesome to help us improve and make these better for you and other families in the future. So if you can fill out that feedback form, it's anonymous, just a few questions, and is hugely helpful. And again, I just want to say thank you. I feel really inspired and grateful, and I'm looking forward to our next class. And thank you to our interpreters. Thank you to Heidi and Lauren. Thank you, Jamie, and all of the Simi team. Jamie, do you want to say anything as well?
Yeah, I just really appreciate the time and our parents that are here this evening. We tried out a different time and day of the week, and it looks like it was beneficial. So we had a lot of participation. So we appreciate your partnership, and we are here to support your children. And thank you to our Daybreak team, our counselors, and our interpreters. We appreciate you being here on a Monday evening as well.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.